what is it called? Oh, it's an oval mop. Okay, you don't need an oval mop. That's just what I have. And also I have paint all over my hands. So that's going right there. Please ignore my horrible dry hands. Goodness, I just noticed that. Okay, not distracted. This is a demo by a sick person. I just want to like clarify, nothing I say is going to make any sense, so just watch what I do. Okay, so I'm using some paints from the Prima Tropical set. I love that set. Why did I pick green? This is green water now, okay? We're doing green water. And I'm doing wet on wet, which means that I've wetted the paper before I started painting. And it's gonna give me this sort of loose, very watery feel. So there you go. I'm gonna throw in another color because that's how I roll. And you're gonna watch it spread around in a very like erratic way. Like it's gonna do its own thing, right? And that's kind of the joy of watercolor, is that it does take a lot of the decision making off your hands in terms of texture. So that's kind of what I'm going for, is like a loose sort of like, I don't know. I don't know the word, forget it. Okay, that's wet on wet. Now let me get my other brush here. I have, whenever I'm doing like an actual gradient, I want to I do it a very specific way. I don't know if this is right. Just take whatever anybody says, anybody at all like tells you to do, with a grain of salt, because most of us are self-taught in a lot of ways, and we don't know what we're talking about, but we know what works for us. So I'm just gonna tell you what works for me, okay? So I'm gonna make two little pools. So if I had my my watercolor well right now, I would blend it in there, because it helps to have like a consistent like color pre-planned, right? And so for this one, let's make that one green again. Okay, so once you're happy with the amount of pigment to water ratio, right, you can get started. So on this one right over here, whoop, whoop, move with me, there we go. You can see my face reflected, don't look. Okay, so with wet on dry, you see you have more control, and you might get some lines in there, but the rule is pretty much the same as you would have with markers, which is just keep going and don't let the paint dry. So I'm going to start putting in my blue gradient as we go down, because you know when you are underwater, as you get further down, it starts to get like a deeper shade of blue, it starts to get darker. I wish I had more blue. More pigment. Okay, so see, I think the edge dried a little bit there, so let me just see if I can reactivate it a little bit. Okay, and then yeah, and just pull the water down like that. So what I'm doing essentially, and I think, I don't know if this is like everybody's definition of like wet on dry, because like some people will get in there real quickly with like, oh, that's a thicker brush than I thought it was. Okay, so they'll get in quickly like this, right? They won't put as much water on, but I'm pretty sure the rules apply here. So you get more control when you're putting on dry paper, because the water or the color isn't going to travel. It's only going to stay in the confines of the water. So when you're laying down the water with the pigment at the same time, you're having more control. You get more of this, which is very lovely. I'm not dissing this. This is great. However, it's not this. This could be more chaotic. It's still a little damp. Okay, so I'm gonna show you something else real quick. So sometimes what happens when I put too much water down is the pigment starts to break up. I think the binder and the paint just can't handle it. And I shouldn't make tutorials when I'm like this because I always regret whatever I say. I'm gonna regret this later, don't worry about it. So when I'm doing this wet on wet, right? Just pretend this was like a wet piece of paper and I put the pigment down all in one go and not in 2 batches. I'm gonna try to put on too much pigment real quick because sometimes this happens, especially if you're new to watercolors. People who are used to acrylics or gouache, they're used to getting like rich results right away, and they expect to just like coat the paper with ink. And what ends up happening when you put too much paint down like that is it can get a little bit I almost said cranky. It can get a little convoluted or confusing, noisy. Whereas a lot of times what we want to see in watercolor is very you do get that saturation, but it's sort of softer. It's more, I don't know what it is, it's just more inviting, I think, when it is softer like that, when it's lighter. When it's this deeply saturated, it doesn't always come across very well. And so what I end up having to do sometimes is I will just sponge off with like a paper towel, like anything that's too much, right? You're still gonna get the buckling of the paper because it is gonna break down the shape of the paper with too much water. But you know what? You can always just thoroughly wet the back, press it between until like the paper is loose, and then like press it between 2 pieces of paper or more, and then between like heavy objects that are flat, and it'll flatten right up. So basically what I was trying to say was for water texture, right? So when I'm painting anything underwater, I like to have sort of a loose texture that's sort of like random. This is fine. This is texture. It is 2 colors, so it does give it a little bit of variation. This is very nice because you do get that temperature drop as you can feel the water getting colder as you go down. But of course, what I like to do the most, oops, there's still some pigment on that, is wet on wet. So wet the paper, throw on some pigment, and let it travel around and do its thing. And then you get some nice random shapes, random textures, and usually people are pretty happy with the results. If you want to make it super random, you can always like use a straw and like blow on it and then watch it like run around. Another thing that's fun to do is make sure that you leave some white space for sparkles. I don't know the technical term, but it does kind of give it like a funner feel to it, of more random, like organic happenstance when you let it like either travel around and leave white space, or you sort of let the edges get lost. And so that's kind of stuff I'll do in the background, especially like for mermaid, which I don't always want backgrounds because it's pretty much the same background a lot of times. But yeah, this one's nice because there is control in the chaos. Like I can throw in colors. I'm gonna throw in some purple. Why? Because I want to. There's no reason for it. We're just being chaotic now. But yeah, wherever there's more water, it's gonna travel more. It's going to make a bigger explosion, and it kind of gives this like fireworks feel to it, and it's sort of magical. So anyways, that's kind of what I wanted to show you about the techniques I use when I'm painting, because I've been trying to articulate it and I don't think I was doing a very good job. Okay, don't know how to end this, so I'll just say bye.